He wasn't emitting guttural sounds to frighten individuals, his bared teeth were not a display of ferocity. He growled because it was the sole means of expression remaining to him. After society had abandoned him at the periphery of a rain-swept animal shelter in Eugene, Oregon, a solitary canine stood utterly isolated, deemed hazardous and irreparably damaged by all. Yet, a reserved mechanic passing by paused. What transpired next was not a rescue but a tacit comprehension between a man of few words and a dog that had endured an excess of hardship. What secrets did this dog conceal beneath those growls? And why did he become motionless each time someone manipulated a door handle? The underlying truth is more somber, more human, and vastly more potent than anyone was prepared to confront. This is a narrative concerning allegiance, unspoken suffering, and the type of connection that requires no verbalization to be unbreakable. Rain adhered to the asphalt in Eugene as if the municipality harbored a sorrow it was unwilling to articulate. Michael was not inclined to mourn anything. He was merely a 42-year-old mechanic with grease embedded beneath his fingernails, a malfunctioning heater in his workshop, and precisely no intentions for the day beyond rectifying a misfiring Subaru and perhaps acquiring coffee from the establishment that consistently scorched the dregs of the pot. Yet, as he ambled past the county animal shelter on 7th Avenue, a customary route on his errands for parts, he observed something that brought him to an abrupt halt. Not a noise, not a bark, merely a stillness. Situated at the distant perimeter of the enclosed yard where the vegetation yielded to mud and where individuals ventured only out of necessity, stood a German shepherd, larger than average, perhaps older. However, what truly captured Michael's attention was not the dog's stature, it was his eyes and that growl, low, guttural, unceasing. The placard, affixed with zip ties to the kennel, proclaimed in bold, crimson lettering, "Caution, aggressive, do not approach." Shelter personnel made no attempt to euphemize the situation. "He's been resident for months," one of them murmured when Michael inquired. "Returned on 3 occasions. Growls at everyone. Lunges if one gets too near. He's not safe. No one desires him." Michael maintained his gaze on the dog, who had not stirred. No barking, no lunging, merely standing as still as stone, emitting a low growl under his breath like someone who had forgotten how to speak but still needed the world to perceive his anguish. Other dogs barked, wagged their tails, scratched at the gates, soliciting attention. This one did not. He did not wish to be observed, yet somehow he could not avert his gaze either. The staff proposed showing him more suitable candidates, younger ones, more amiable ones, dogs unburdened by cautionary labels. But Michael was not searching, not for a dog, not for anything in particular. And yet he remained observing. There was a familiar quality to that growl, not menacing, merely restrained, as if the dog were posing the question, "Will you abandon me as well?" Michael departed without much comment, merely nodding before stepping out into the light rain. But an aspect of that moment lingered heavily, the sound of tires hissing over wet roads, the acrid taste of overbrewed coffee, and that growl, lodged somewhere in his ribs like a persistent echo. That evening he endeavored to dismiss it. He changed the oil in an aged Ford, viewed a repeat broadcast of a sporting event that held no interest for him, and evaded every thought that attempted to redirect him to that muddy corner kennel. Yet, when he extinguished the lights in the workshop and heard the wind pressing against the garage door, that subdued growl replayed in his mind like a recurring melody. Because, truth be told, Michael was not a rescuer. He was not a tender-hearted individual afflicted with a messiah complex. But he comprehended what it signified to be perceived as too damaged for repair. He had overheard the hushed remarks made behind his back regarding his excessive reserve, his altered demeanor since his father's passing, and the workshop foreclosure that had nearly overwhelmed him the previous year. And now somehow that growl, the dogs felt as though it emanated from a place he was reluctant to revisit. So what does one do when something haunts without uttering a single word? One returns. One sits with it. One attempts to understand. But one does not label it destiny, one simply terms it unfinished. Michael had not intended to go back, that, at least, is what he convinced himself. He was not inclined to become entangled in the affairs of animal shelters, lacked the forbearance for emotionally scarred canines, and most certainly did not possess the time to mend something already designated as beyond salvation. Yet, the subsequent evening, as if guided by an unseen force, he found himself once more before the shelter. The precipitation had not ceased, nor had the oppressive feeling in his chest. Perhaps it was merely inquisitiveness, or perhaps something more profound. Regardless, the gravel crunched beneath his boots as he re-entered the same gate he had passed the day prior. The personnel recognized him. One arched an eyebrow as if anticipating his departure. He did not depart. Instead, Michael proceeded again to the distant perimeter, to that identical muddy enclosure housing the same weathered German shepherd, still standing, still growling, still unmoving. The familiar sound emanated from the dog's throat like a subdued, percussive rhythm, quiet yet unyielding. Michael uttered no words, made no gesture to reach out. He simply squatted, resting his arms upon his knees, and observed the dog through the chain-link barrier as if attempting to solve an intricate puzzle without direct contact. The silence between them felt more resonant than any bark. It was not a contest of gazes, it was something more deliberate, more peculiar, the kind of instant that seems out of place in a shelter teeming with a cacophony of barks. Minutes elapsed. The dog did not lunge, nor did it flinch, it merely stood there, growling, its eyes fixed on Michael's as if recognizing an unspoken understanding. Then, almost imperceptibly, it shifted a foot forward. A slow blink. The growl softened, no longer sharp, but tinged with confusion, with pain. Even from within, a staff member peered through the window and whispered to another, "That's the longest anyone has remained near him." Over the ensuing days, Michael continued his visits. Not seeking answers, not driven by pity. He didn't even bring treats or toys as other prospective adopters did. He brought something more uncommon, stillness. A human who demanded nothing of the dog. No commands, no expectations, merely presence. Each visit followed the same pattern. Michael would kneel beside the enclosure, hands in his jacket pockets, observing. The dog, still nameless, still unknown, would stand or lie down nearby, growling softly like an engine refusing to stall. But something shifted gradually, quietly, like thawing ice. The growl became fainter, less a warning, more a murmur, a habit, an echo of something that had once ensured his survival but no longer served a purpose. Here, Michael began to notice details others had overlooked. The dog never averted his gaze from exits. He positioned himself so no one could approach from behind. His body didn't tremble like a frightened pup's, it remained ready like a soldier perpetually on edge long after the conflict ended. One evening, as the sky fractured with distant thunder and the rain transformed into sharp needles against the metal roof, the dog lay down for the first time while Michael was present. Not out of trust, not yet, but something approaching it. The growl ceased for 2 full minutes, and that was sufficient. Michael didn't smile, didn't utter a word. But in that silence, a man with no time for broken things sat with something the world had already discarded and chose, without any ostentation, to remain a little longer. Because sometimes the most profound kind of pain isn't the kind that screams, it's the kind that growls in corners, waiting for someone to listen without attempting to fix it. And Michael, he wasn't trying to fix anything. He was just listening. A peculiar form of reasoning takes hold when one's intuition and emotions begin to overpower rational thought. Logically, Michael possessed every justification for not bringing the dog to his home. He was already burdened with sufficient responsibilities, overdue invoices, a malfunctioning lift in the workshop, and an aged pickup truck that sputtered more frequently than it operated smoothly. He did not require an additional encumbrance, particularly one endowed with teeth and past suffering. And yet, there he stood at the counter within the shelter, pen in hand, affixing his signature to documents like a man who had not spent the entirety of the preceding night persuading himself against this very course of action. The staff made no effort to conceal their doubt. One presented him with the leash as if handing over a live explosive device. He dislikes men, she cautioned, as though Michael had not already deduced this. He growls in his sleep. Just don't anticipate too much. I won't, Michael mumbled, and he was sincere. He did not bestow a name upon the dog, not due to a lack of care, but because assigning a name felt like imposing permanence upon a wound still raw. Consequently, he referred to him as Dog, simple, unpretentious, much like everything else in Michael's existence. The journey home was quiet. Dog sat rigidly in the passenger seat, not barking, not looking out the window, not even sniffing, just growling softly, rhythmically, as if each mile brought him closer to a memory he didn't want to revisit. Michael's house was situated just behind his workshop, nestled at the edge of a neighborhood that hadn't seen new siding in 2 decades. The place wasn't fancy, an aging porch, a crooked fence, tools stacked like bookshelves in corners, but it was his. He opened the door, let Dog in first, and waited. Dog paced from room to room, checking doors, corners, windows. He didn't wag his tail, didn't sniff curiously. He moved like a soldier clearing a building, head low, back tense, and that growl never stopped, not angry, just tired, like he couldn't let go of a threat that refused to show itself. Michael didn't force interaction. He tossed a blanket in the corner of the living room, filled a bowl with water, and set out some dry food. Then he sat on the couch, turned on a busted heater, and went about pretending this was normal. Dog didn't touch the food until the lights were off. Even then, it was one cautious bite at a time, as if each kibble might betray him. At night, the true tempest commenced. Michael was roused by a subdued, warbling growl emanating from beneath the bed. Dog had wedged himself under the frame, pressed so firmly against the floorboards he seemed a part of the shadows. His eyes were wide open, unblinking, fixated on something unseen. Or perhaps it was there. Michael remained still, initially refraining from speech, allowing the silence to settle. Then he extended one hand near the edge of the bed, not to touch, merely to be near. "You're safe," he whispered. 3 words, that was all. Dog did not cease growling, but the sound diminished like a record slowing. His breathing steadied barely. That night, neither of them slept. The subsequent morning, Michael observed something minor. Dog's blanket, previously undisturbed, was disheveled, not neatly, not comfortably, but sufficiently to indicate it had been occupied for perhaps an hour, maybe less. Yet it was something. Michael did not smile, nor did he offer praise. That was not the nature of their interaction. This was not a cinematic redemption arc with soaring music and a montage of affectionate gestures. This was something more gradual, more understated, more delicate than anyone else would invest the time to comprehend. Dog did not wag his tail, but he did not flee. He remained. And in Michael's world, that signified more than any tail wag ever could. At times, healing does not manifest in conspicuous moments, it does not erupt in a startling transformation or a tearful embrace. Occasionally, it reveals itself in the most insignificant abrasions, literally. The kind one doesn't perceive until a hand brushes against the edge of a doorframe and something snags the skin. That is how Michael discovered them, slender, deep, and inflamed. The sort of scratches inflicted by desperation, not tedium. Claw marks, old yet renewed, etched into the wood directly beside Dog's resting place. And they were not made in an attempt to escape, they were directed at something within the room. Initially, Michael attributed it to nightmares. Dog had been growling in his sleep again, a rumble sufficiently low to cause the floorboards to vibrate. But then the pattern emerged, same location, same depth, same urgency. Michael stood there longer than he intended, his fingers tracing each groove as if reading braille that narrated only tales of panic. Dog observed him from a corner of the room, partially concealed behind a damaged toolbox. His eyes did not convey guilt, they pleaded. Not apologetic, merely, please understand. There was no wagging tail, no endearing yawn, no moment of contrived bonding. Just Dog, half shadow, half statue, trembling without a sound. Michael posed no questions, not audibly. He simply relocated the sleeping area to the workshop near the old furnace where the metal creaked like respiring lungs, where the reverberations were different. That first night in the new space, Dog slept, not soundly, not for long, but without growling. That ought to have signified advancement, a positive step, correct? Yet, progress is rarely courteous. It is disordered, perplexing. It does not invariably arrive cloaked in solace. Because the very next day, Dog disappeared, not departed entirely, merely vanished from view. Michael entered through the rear of the workshop and perceived it instantly, the untouched water bowl, the stillness, not even the tap of claws on tiles. He called out once. No reply. Then a second time. Nothing. The alarm did not manifest as a sudden wave, it insinuated itself slowly, one breath at a time. Then he located him, wedged behind an oil drum in the corner, his body pressed tightly against the wall, his gaze fixed on the garage bay door. Not barking, not concealing himself, merely frozen. Michael knelt beside him and Dog growled. But it was not directed at him, it was different now, shorter, sharper, targeted. What do you see? Michael murmured. He looked towards the door but observed nothing. Nevertheless, that evening he double-locked the front entrance just as a precaution. And just when he believed he had witnessed the worst of it, a customer, a regular, a man with heavy boots and a thick jacket entered and slammed a car door behind him. The sound reverberated off the cinder block walls like a firecracker. Dog lost control. He bolted from behind the bench, skidding across the floor, teeth bared, not at the man, but at the air itself. He dove under the workbench, curled in tight, and growled so intensely he began to choke on it. Michael didn't flinch. He didn't shout. He didn't tell the man to leave or try to calm Dog down. He just dropped to the floor, sat cross-legged near the bench, and whispered again, just once, "It's over, Dog." And it was as if those words had weight. The growling sputtered, the air cleared. Dog didn't move. But the fight in his chest began to slow. Michael sat there for over an hour. Didn't move. Didn't ask questions because this wasn't a moment to fix. It was a moment to feel. And if Dog needed someone to sit in the dark with him while he remembered the shadows, then that's what Michael would do. Later, while cleaning up, Michael found something else, an old collar tucked away in the folds of the blanket from the shelter. No tag, no name, just leather worn down by time and what looked like bite marks near the buckle. The mystery wasn't just growing, it was staring him in the face. And dog, he hadn't made a sound since. Not a bark, not a growl, only silence, the kind that doesn't beg to be filled, just understood. If tranquility possessed an aroma, it would be that of scorched coffee, heated motor lubricant, and a canine finally slumbering for a continuous 3 hours. For once, the workshop exuded a quietude that imposed no demands. Michael swept the floor, a task he performed every Tuesday, part habit, part catharsis, and paused only when the broom made contact with the corner near the electrical panel. He glanced upwards. The attic entrance was slightly ajar. Peculiar. He had not ventured up there in months, perhaps even a year. It was not as if he concealed valuables in the attic, merely containers of knotted cables, defective alternators he intended to recycle, and a few antiquated license plates he had never bothered to display. But the door, it had been secured. He was certain of it. Dog stood at the foot of the stairs, his tail lowered, his body still, his head inclined, not growling, not barking, merely staring as if awaiting Michael's acknowledgement of what he already comprehended. Michael ascended slowly, half anticipating the discovery of a squirrel or a raccoon or perhaps merely his own unease. The air above was stagnant, heavy with dust and the passage of time. But what he had not foreseen was the scent, not the musty fragrance of mildew and forgotten storage, but something sharper, colder, akin to gun oil and rubber. Almost military. Beneath one of the crates, he located it. A boot print, large, deep, recent. Someone had been up here. That was the initial tremor before the storm. Downstairs, Dog was now pacing. He wasn't frantic, just locked into something internal, like the gears in his head were grinding into place and whatever memory they were turning toward wasn't something he wanted to share. When Michael stepped toward him, Dog circled once, then pressed against the shop wall, his gaze fixed on the attic door behind him. Later that day, Michael stopped by the corner store, grabbed a six-pack, and casually mentioned the boot print to the cashier, Judy, who always overshared in the best way. "Oh, that old shop of yours," she said. "You know the guy before you moved out quick, right?" Said he kept hearing things in the ceiling. Thought he was losing his mind or someone was watching him. Michael didn't answer, just paid and left. That night, Dog wouldn't eat. He lay curled against the furnace, body tense, ears flicking at every pop and creak. And then it happened again, the noise, soft, in the attic. A thump, then dragging, then silence. Michael grabbed his flashlight, but Dog stepped in front of him, blocking the stairs. Not with teeth, but with intent. The kind of stance that wasn't asking, it was warning. Michael didn't go up. He just stood there, flashlight heavy in his hand, heart heavier in his chest. The next morning, Michael found more scratches on the inside of the attic door, this time. And near them, something even worse, a hairline crack in the wall. Fresh. The growling had returned. Not constant, not loud, but there. Deeper, lower, focused. Dog stood at the back door, watching the trees beyond the fence like something was going to step through them any minute. And Michael began to believe him because maybe Dog wasn't just damaged. Maybe Dog remembered something. And whatever it was getting closer. Certain canines vocalize at nothingness. Dog, however, did not squander his breath on chimerical dangers. He awaited genuine threats. That afternoon had commenced like any other, a subdued melody playing in the background, a fractured tailpipe suspended from the lift, and Dog nestled by the rear wall of the workshop, his eyes open but tranquil. Michael had accepted a roadside assistance task just beyond the town limits, nothing elaborate, merely a stalled truck with a battery so depleted it could have been a museum piece. Yet, upon his return, an unsettling feeling pervaded the moment he opened the door. No welcoming growl, no pacing shadows, no Dog. Initially, it did not concern him. Dog possessed an ethereal quality when he chose, more elusive than a thief, quieter than remorse. But the food bowl remained untouched, his water undisturbed. And the workshop, it was still. Not peacefully still, but hollowly still, the kind of silence that permits apprehension to infiltrate unnoticed until it coils around one's spine. "Dog," Michael called out once. Silence. Then again, more assertively, "Dog." Still no response. Michael commenced a search of every corner, beneath the workbench, behind the compressor, even the dusty crawl space by the wall where Dog sometimes sought refuge during storms. Gone. That is when he perceived it. A bark, muffled, desperate, emanating from the rear office. He hurried to the door, but it was secured. Michael never secured that door. His fingers trembled as he manipulated the knob once more. Still locked. Then he observed the shadow beneath the door, movement, pacing, the scratch of claws. That bark again, sharper this time. He forced the door open with a shoulder slam. It creaked inward with resistance. And there he was, Dog, spinning in circles, hackles raised, panting as if he had just completed a mile run. Yet it was not fear that permeated the room, it was alertness. His eyes were not on Michael, they were fixated on the window. The window was open, just slightly. The screen was torn. Someone had been inside. Michael surveyed the room and immediately noticed the alteration. One of the storage containers had been displaced. He knelt and pulled it aside, revealing a bag behind it, not one of his. This object was covered in dust and grime, as if it had been concealed long before Michael had ever leased this property. He unzipped it. Inside, duct tape, gloves, a flashlight with dried mud still adhering to it, and, folded with precision, an old security jacket. The emblem on the shoulder patch had faded, but the lettering was still discernible, Everguard Tactical Solutions. Michael's heart lurched. He had encountered that name previously. A year ago, they had provided security for a major construction project 5 blocks away, now derelict. Speculation had surrounded the location, guard dogs, private agreements, no public entry. The site was closed down following contractual breaches, but the nature of those breaches was never disclosed. Michael dropped the jacket and looked at Dog. He wasn't growling, he was shaking. Not from fear, but from something worse, recognition. Dog padded forward and sniffed the jacket, then backed away slowly. His tail stayed low, his breathing short, as if he were waiting for a command he hoped would never come again. That night, neither of them slept. Dog didn't pace. He didn't move. He planted himself at the front door like a statue built to protect. Michael locked every window, bolted the doors, and placed a crowbar near the side of the couch. Because that bag, it wasn't just a memory, it was a breadcrumb, a message. Whoever had been in that room, whatever connection Dog had to that uniform, they weren't done, and they might be coming back. It commenced with the wind buffeting the siding, followed by a shift in atmospheric pressure that caused the front door to creak just sufficiently to rouse Michael from his slumber. He inspected the windows one by one, all were secured. Yet, Dog remained rigid in the hallway, his gaze fixed on the door as if it owed him an explanation. Then the sound recurred, this time unmistakably, metal on concrete, not the casual tap of athletic shoes or the languid scuff of a delivery person, but a deliberate, heavy sound, the slow drag of steel-toed boots. Dog moved first, silent, focused. He positioned himself before the door, his body squared like a living barricade. Michael followed, a crowbar in one hand, his heart pounding in the other. No flashlight, no words, just him, Dog, and the sound of someone attempting to manipulate the handle. Not gently, not like a neighbor who had forgotten something. No, this was precise, like someone who believed they possessed the right to be inside. The lock held, but that was not the crucial point. The real impact came when the sound ceased completely. No retreat, no footsteps moving away, just nothing. A silence that did not feel empty, but watchful. Michael yanked the door open, crowbar raised. No one. Only the echo of a thread in the foggy air and a single boot print in the mud, deep and perfect. Not old, not washed away by rain. New. Dog did not follow him outside. He stood at the threshold, unmoving. His eyes scanned the tree line as if he anticipated movement, as if he had witnessed this scenario before and knew precisely how it would conclude. Michael contacted the police. They informed him of what every man in a small town anticipates hearing. We'll investigate it in the morning. Translation: you are on your own tonight. He terminated the call and dragged the tool bench in front of the door. Dog never broke eye contact with the trees. That night, sleep eluded them. Michael sat on the floor, crowbar beside him, observing Dog observe the world. As the rain fell and the wind tested the windows, Michael whispered, "Who were you with before me?" No growl, no sight, but a look, a stillness so sharp it might have drawn blood. Like Dog knew exactly who, but had spent years learning not to speak it. In the early hours, just as the sky started bleeding pale blue through the clouds, Dog did something he hadn't done since Michael brought him home. He howled, long, hollow, not calling, not warning, grieving. Michael froze, not from fear, but from the raw truth of it. That howl wasn't instinct, it was memory. And in it was a story Michael hadn't heard, but didn't need to. The attic scratches, the window, the security jacket, the training that showed up in Dog's every move. This wasn't just trauma, it was unfinished business. Dog hadn't just survived something, he had escaped something. And whatever it wasn't done with him yet. By morning, the boot print had vanished into the mud like a secret engulfed by the earth. But the tension lingered. It permeated the kitchen chairs, rode the oil fumes in the workshop, and curled up beside Dog as he tracked every shadow. Michael could no longer dismiss it. He wasn't merely providing shelter for a damaged animal, he was safeguarding something or someone with a history too perilous to remain interred. And if he desired peace, it was time to unearth whatever was tormenting Dog from within. He commenced with the jacket. The company Everguard Tactical Solutions no longer possessed a local telephone number. The business directory entry redirected to a corporate mailing address in Portland. No names, no genuine contacts, merely a facade with a locked gate and no response to the intercom. Michael did not desist there. He drove 2 hours northward and located the premises himself, an old lot, the fencing overgrown, the paint on the signage flaking like sunburned skin. Office closed. No trespassing. But he was not there for official inquiries, he was guided by instinct. Dog had remained silent throughout the entire journey. Yet, when they turned onto the side alley adjacent to the property, everything altered. Dog shifted in his seat, sat upright, nose to the air, his eyes fixed. Then he leaped directly through the open truck window, his paws striking the pavement, his tail rigid, his head low. He did not run erratically, he tracked straight towards a panel of wood carelessly nailed over what had once been a maintenance shed. Michael scrambled after him, his heart pounding, keys still in the ignition, his thoughts racing with worst-case scenarios. Dog clawed at the wood as if it were paper, frenzied, determined. Michael wrenched it down with a tire iron. Behind it, a rusted steel door creaked open. The odor struck first, burned rubber, mildew, and something chemical. He stepped inside, and there it was, a container, metal, sealed at one point, now broken open. Shredded documents spilled across the ground, torn photos, a cracked tablet, tactical gear covered in dust. And in the corner, blackened fabric melted into a patch of concrete. Michael crouched and pulled it free, a vest, burned and tattered, but still legible. K-9 unit. Do not approach without command. And stitched beneath it, barely hanging on, Echo. Dog walked over slowly. He sniffed the vest, then sat beside it, not alert, not growling, just still, as if the thing he'd been carrying finally had a place to land. Michael didn't speak, he couldn't. Everything clicked. The growling, the fear, the precision. Dog hadn't been abandoned because he was aggressive. He was abandoned because he was trained, weaponized, used. And when whatever job he'd been forced into went wrong, he was left behind like faulty equipment, scrubbed, forgotten. But he remembered everything. Dog didn't cry. He just leaned his weight into Michael's side and let out a long, tired breath, the kind you only release when you've finally made it out alive. Michael wrapped one arm around his neck. The silence between them said more than language ever could. I don't know what they did to you, he whispered. But you're not property. You're not gear. You're home now. Dog didn't flinch. He didn't growl. He stayed. And for the first time, his body, tense since the day they met, melted into the ground. Not as a soldier, not as a tool, but as a dog, a soul, a survivor. They didn't need closure. They had each other. And sometimes that's enough to end a war.